one after, so we'll go ahead and just start warming into our introductions here. Hello, everyone, and thank you for all of you that are starting to roll in for sharing a bit of your time today here on this, for us, where I'm located, a very cold January day here in Cincinnati, Ohio. We have attendees spread from all over the country as we're going to be introing here. But today, as you signed up for, we are hosting Mixed with the Wild, which is a bi-monthly series with the Wild focused on innovative solutions for the architecture, engineering, and construction industry using extended reality. Today, we've been so fortunate to co-host this event with BSA LifeStructures on how they use virtual reality for more efficient technical design. We are joined today by innovators. Number one, Tim Bosche, the Chief Design Officer at BSA. Hello, Tim. Quick wave hello. And as well as Luke Abkes, Architectural Designer at BSA, and Chief, as we would call him, a VR champion at bringing this technology to the forefront of BSA. So what we're hoping to get out of this event today is a 45-minute conversation with these design leaders on how they've been able to efficiently use VR as one of the many tools in their belt as they align on technical designs for some of our community's most important stakeholders. BSA LifeStructures is known for their facilities for healing, learning, and discovery. Today, as an attendee, you will become proficient in understanding the valuable returns of VR to produce better technical design, how to identify green flags for using VR as a tool for some of your project components, and we'll show some easy VR workflows to enable more progressive and sustainable work. And we'll be leaving some time at the end for Q&A, so you can drop those in the Q&A section at the bottom. We'll leave plenty of time to make sure that we can answer some of the specificalities of how you're using VR here. But a bit about our attendees, since we're so fortunate to share time with them. Tim Bosche, Chief Design Officer at BSA LifeStructures, is a very adept and visual designer. Tim takes the aspirations and desires of the space and transforms them into a well thought out strategic vision for the project. His specialty is in communicating design ideas and intent through the latest technological applications and integrating vision into stimulating architecture. Tim, thank you so much for being here. We're also joined by Luke Abkes, the architectural designer at BSA LifeStructures. Luke has a passion for seeing his projects through to the end and observing the impacts they have on the community. Volunteering in his spare time, Luke understands the impact of well-designed care centers and how they affect the communities they serve. Luke approaches each project with enthusiasm and strives to optimize the workflow for himself and those around him. Luke, great to have you here. Finally, we'll be joined by our host, AJ Lightheart, an AEC immersive technology consultant at the Wild. AJ has been an emerging technology leader in the AEC industry for the past 11 years. As a trusted advisor for SMB to ENR top 500 companies, AJ has consistently found a passion for connecting technology to a practical ROI. Outside of consulting, AJ loves trying new craft beers and trying to keep up with his boys. As part of this, as the Mix with the Wild series, is that we'll make sure that we'll have a recording of this event afterwards to share with you. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to AJ for kicking off this conversation.
No, thank you, Austin. And as always, for the way too kind of introduction. It's always weird hearing your own bio, but very much appreciative of that. And just echoing thank you to Tim and Luke. Very blessed to have you both here today. And for all of you joining us, Austin hinted at it, people join from all over the world. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're at. We do not take it for granted you carving out time from your hectic lives and work schedules to be with us here today. I'm very confident you will get some very tangible items that will be of interest and helpful in how this could apply to your design workflow. A few just quick housekeeping items. As Austin mentioned, we are going to be doing a Q&A session at the end of our time, so please drop in any questions you have into the chat function. We'll make sure we get to those. And on that same vein, if you have other topics that you think would be of interest for us to cover in upcoming Mix webinars, please feel free to drop those in there as well. We want to make sure these are engaging, on point for the top topics that are on your mind. So feel free to drop those in as well. Well, I guess just to kick off the conversation, Tim and Luke, maybe a good starting question would be just, who's BSA? A bit more, what type of work do you do and deliver?
Sure. Well, BSA LifeStructures, we are a full-service design firm focused on healing, learning, and discovery projects. That includes projects in higher education, science and tech, and anything in the healthcare arena. We have approximately 250 people, and they are located in 7 regional offices across the country. Our design teams typically consist of architects, engineers, interior designers, and operational planners, and they're all working towards creating inspired solutions that improve lives.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And knowing that VR has been a part of your repertoire for a bit here, steps back in time a little bit. What attracted your team to virtual reality initially?
You know, as designers, there's really, amongst others, 3 key components that really attracted us, and that's the ability to be innovative, improve our presentation methods, as well as improve our efficiency. And VR really checks all 3 of those boxes. When we talk about innovation, it gives us a way to walk through a space months or even years before it's constructed, and that's beneficial to both us as designers, but it's also beneficial to users and clients to get them more familiar with something and get extra buy-in. As far as presentation methods, it's a huge communication tool for us. Good designers aren't always good communicators and vice versa. But what VR does is it kind of levels that playing field, and it gives us an opportunity to bring clients, to bring users in that aren't used to just seeing things 2D, paper, pencil,
Sure.
to immerse them within an environment that they're able to really start to understand what we're talking about. And as far as efficiency, that kind of speaks for itself. We can look at spaces as a design group. As in BSA, we have 7 offices around the nation. So I can pull somebody in from Tampa, from Indy, from St. Louis, all at the same time to look at maybe the same high design element, whether that be a reception desk or a soffit detail, or even an exam room. We can really start to get in and see the same space as if we're in the same room. And we're always looking for new tools that inform our decisions in different ways, because who knows how that client is going to be able to interact with us or what they're going to be able to understand. And as designers, like I said, to be able to be immersed in our work, that's just a huge tool. And virtual reality offers that above and beyond anything else that I've ever seen.
No, it's great that it's found dual purpose uses in where it can bring value to your team and your organization. And clearly your team, BSA as a whole, has great brand equity for cutting edge design, several complex, very highly functional projects in your portfolio. How has VR helped contribute to those values?
Well, I think VR has really allowed us to align as a team early in the design process. We're always looking for, Luke kind of mentioned it, we're always looking for tools to help us communicate and our conceptual ideas. We no longer have to just pin up our work and talk about it. We can actually jump into it. As a team, as an integrated team, it just helps us get alignment, establish design drivers early on, make informed decisions, and the end result of that is usually a better coordinated design. It's a stronger design, and it seems to eliminate a lot of the costly rework that you sometimes experience, or we were experiencing later in the design phases.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback on that a little bit, Tim, I'll be honest, initially I pigeonholed virtual reality into just like, this is something we can use to help us design. But although that is our main catalyst of it, that's not at all the only thing it's used for. And we've been using this through pre-design for programming. We've been using it through construction administration. We can even use it during post-occupancy evaluations, because as our projects around the nation are spread out more and more, anytime we can save a 5.5-hour one-way trip, well, for one, that pays for a headset in itself, and just billable hours. But it's a huge advantage for us to be able to use that and to be able to collectively design within a space with contractors and clients and other designers is again just a way to get us all in the same virtual room looking at the same thing, because we never know which client is or isn't going to be able to again look at those 2D drawings and visualize in a 3D space. And the less surprises we can give them with a delivered product, the better. That's kind of our goal with VR.
That's great. And just taking some notes here myself, it seems that just the power of bringing people together, connecting your offices, virtualizing transportation, if you will, in many ways, that has proven very valuable to your organization, both internally amongst offices, but externally with customers and contractors as well. So thank you both for adding that perspective. And, you know, I'm sure a lot of people that are joining us here today, a question that might be looming in their minds is, how do we know when it's time to use VR? And I guess I'd be curious, I'm sure they're curious, is do you as an organization, as a team, have any, like a checklist or any green flags that you work through for determining when VR will be a great tool to use for different components of a project?
Yeah, we don't have a checklist per se, but I think if you look at our VR efforts to date, they fall into three categories or lanes. The most obvious one would be high profile spaces. We don't necessarily need to look at an entire building or project in VR. Sometimes we just need to highlight whether it's the building lobby or entrance. It could be an active social space associated with an educational project. You know, it's any time where you're going to have to put a little bit more of a concerted effort to be coordinated, where you're going to have a lot more highly visible projects or highly visible spaces, I'll say. The second category that we have a lot of our projects would be in the prototypical environments. VR's really replaced the need for contractors to build cardboard and foam mock-ups. This replaces that, and it allows us to, you know, not only get in there and test, but get in there and create in real time. We find that to be a really valuable tool, especially in prototypical spaces that might be repeated, you know, 40 or 50 times within a project, whether it's maybe a patient room in healthcare, maybe it's an exam room or an adopted exam room for a hospital-wide use for clinics. The third category for that would probably be very complex spaces that need to be highly thought out. In the healthcare world, that might be an OR, it might be an imaging room, anywhere where we have a lot of different disciplines, and the success of the room really depends on those systems being locked in and the equipment working right and making sure that we have adequate spaces.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And I think those will be, when we hop into the headset here momentarily, we'll share and highlight some of those workflows of how you all have brought that to life. And I guess a secondary question, again, I'm sure a topic on a lot of people's minds is, what real returns have you seen from this usage, whether it be time saving or just producing better work? What does that look like for BSA?
Yeah, I'll tackle that one. I come from a construction background, so as a designer, I'm very much about the design intent, and I think that's a little bit more of an old school way of approaching things. But I think in a lot of ways it's better, because when I walk onto a construction site, I can guarantee you I'm not the smartest person there when it comes to construction. So if I can provide my intent of how to do something in this VR model, that's an incredibly valuable tool for us. And it's an extra way for us to be able to communicate with a contractor or any of the engineers for me. And it drives us to produce more accurate models, because in our industry, there's sometimes a lot of faking things, and that's not bad by any means. But once you jump into VR, any casework that you've maybe drawn with a detail line or a model line doesn't show up, and then it's blank. And those are ways, the less high quality of modeling that we do, there can be more gaps. There can be more scope gaps within the model. So being able to jump in and maybe see how two different ceilings turn a corner, like to look around the corner for your details, is something that we're taught. And VR really offers us a great avenue for that. And then a more in-depth return on investment. We teamed up with the Wild, and we teamed up with Saunders Heath out of Denver, Colorado, on a project that was already completed. And we kind of sat down, and I think we wrote a paper on this with the Wild. Actually, Austin, if possible, maybe we could either provide information on that after this, or maybe put a link to that in the chat. But what we found is there were a number of RFIs that took a lot of email correspondence between the design team and the engineering team and the client. And being able to talk through email wasn't enough. So then we talked on the phone. And inevitably I had to make a trip out there to look at some of these soffit details, because there were some coordination issues between structural, MEP, and architectural. And we all thought we were right. Turns out we all kind of were right. It's just we weren't right together, which is it was kind of a big issue, but we were able to solve it on site. I could have saved 11 hours of driving if I would have been able to just get into the headset and see exactly what was going on, to be able to point, move things around, and say, okay, this is set. This is how we're going to be able to do things now. So that's one huge way that we're able to do it. The other thing that we often overlook is client acquisition and retention. Clients are always, just like us, looking for the next best thing. And if we can offer them, if we have that VR capability, that gives us a seat at a table we otherwise may not have had.
Well, you always get me excited about it and seeing what possibilities are. How about we share that with some of the larger group here? I think we're at a good point to hop into headset and show how this is aiding your technical design. First off, everyone, if this is your first time into the wild, welcome into the workshop, or the Cobra Kai Dojo, as I prefer to call it. And yeah, thank you all again for being with us. And maybe a good starting point, Luke and Tim, is tell us what you've set up here in the workshop and why you have set it up in this fashion as well.
Sure. Well, this is a working model that we created for a learning center, about 72,000 square feet, for a hospital in Springfield, Illinois. Primarily, we were looking at the third floor of this project, which is the simulation center. For those of you who aren't familiar with what a sim center is, hospitals oftentimes use these to not only educate future nurses and physicians, but also nurses and physicians themselves, to help them sharpen and hone their skills on new procedures so that they can be more productive and more successful working on real patients. So you're looking at the third floor section. We pulled that out of Revit, put it in here. This is probably late SD, early DD. And one of the challenges we had was we had a wish list of a whole bunch of simulation rooms, and typically you'll find those are the high fidelity spaces that have to be pretty accurate to what they might find in the hospital next door. And when you start to create all those little pieces that you need to have and circulate them around a central core, we need to make sure that we test our lines of sight, that we have good visions from control rooms, because again, we're controlling the environment and seeing how some of those students and physicians would respond. And we also have to have classrooms that function properly. So there again, you're looking down in the classroom, and I think you're going to start in the classroom to the lower left there.
Yeah.
Next to AJ and Luke.
Yeah, I'm going to hop down and we'll look hello to you all up there. And yeah, Austin, you can come down and join us here, and I'll go ahead and turn the ceiling back on here really quickly. Oh, of course, not a problem.
So this is the typical classroom where you might expect to get traditional instruction, and then students can work in teams off to the side here and test their skill sets, what they just learned. Again, it's not the most high fidelity space, but those people that you see on the patient beds could be people acting in real roles, or they could be simulation dolls that respond to maybe giving the wrong medication. So we have the ability here to make sure that everything sets and functions right, and that we can have the access to the patient and still have our supplies on hand. And Luke, why don't you show them what you can control there?
So there's a few items that we have here. You can maybe see me dimensioning. So see that we have a 9-foot ceiling space. We might come into a space like this and see that the upper casework is either too high or too low. So we can go ahead and get that measured, or get that moved, and get that remeasured. We're at 1'9" now. AJ right now is showing you one of my favorite tools, is just the massing. So when we go into a space, we can really see and kind of create within the space. And one important note is that Revit still for us is our one true source of information. So anything done in here doesn't impact a model elsewhere. But a space like this is vitally important for the students, because you can see they might be looking over this patient, doing kind of what they do, reaching around, but they still have the line of sight to us, and that screen right behind you is kind of their instructional video. So they're going to be able to see what's going on there and then repeat what happens. So that line of sight is vitally important. And I do have to, I told AJ, if I don't get to do this at least once today, it's kind of a waste. But you can actually pick anything up in here and just throw it into space. And that's kind of your delete key. And that's honestly, above all else, that's what sold me on this. I love that aspect of it. So that's a pretty cool feature. Thanks for adding that one in.
Well, you know,
oh, go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
Well, real quick, let me just add to what Luke said. You know, when we get into a model like this, we've designed multiple sim centers before. We've designed hundreds of classrooms. We have a good idea of what the client wants, but at the same time, every project seems to be a little bit more unique and there's special requests. So oftentimes we'll take a first pass like this model and put them in the environment, and then they can respond to it. Yes, that makes sense. As Luke said, maybe this is too much casework, or we don't have enough storage for what I need to store. It gets that conversation rolling, and we can start to make rough edits. And again, I would say this is a rough working model. Obviously, there's some crooked casework that he's putting in there, but we can make and talk through it seamlessly, and then capture that. There's an ability in the wild to capture a photograph of that space, and then we can send that out electronically to all of the team members and get that incorporated in the Revit model right away. Really effective tool. And there you can see him with the camera. Again, we'll use this for QA/QC design reviews. We'll just walk through, whether even sometimes we're not even with clients, we're just with other team members. And we're just saying, this doesn't look right. Maybe it's not modeled correctly. And it just tips us off to areas that we need to put a little bit more focus on. That's fantastic to be able to capture.
AJ, do you mind if we show them that control room real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
You want to hop back into the dojo? I can kind of give us a "you are here" map a little bit. So one thing we like to be able to use here is we can put this map right up there, which I can circle the room we were just in. It's in white, and I'll turn that to red so we can see it a little bit more easily on the screen. So that's in red. And for this particular model, we have kind of our backup house. These areas are all imaging, and then the orange shown all through here. That's our kind of our control rooms. And I'm going to have AJ bring us to this control room. Actually, yeah, that control room right there, to show us a little bit of a view. So AJ, if you want to go there, and then we can see the call. You can call us to you to
yeah
your navigation.
Yeah, one quick question while I hop down there is, how important or impactful has it been having all these different assets as a way to get your story? Because I see you're not just relying on the model. I mean, you have the 2D, you have the video, of course, the model. How important is being able to combine them all together in how you have created this process?
That's critical. I mean, we put some of the project so you could see what it is, but being able to have at your fingertips 3D model content, animations, photos from maybe group tours that we went on. It just makes the whole virtual experience that more robust. We're not getting in the headset and then taking the headset off to look at something and then getting back in the headset. It's amazing when you're in there and you can have a conversation, and literally, I kind of think of it as Mary Poppins in her carpet bag pulling out that lamp. I mean, you can pull giant pieces out of that window there and start to have conversations. So if a client's confused about the bigger picture, we can pull up a floor plan and talk about it standing within the space and show how maybe the space that we're reviewing relates back to the other programmatic elements. Really powerful, really effective, and it just makes the communication seamless.
Perfect. Thanks for speaking to that. And Luke, what do we got set up right here?
Yes. So this is a typical control center, a control room that we have a lab technician or a physician sitting in, and line of sight in an area like this is huge. So this is actually a photo taken after construction was completed. If I turn this photo off, you can see kind of just toggling back and forth the what is seen in the VR model versus what is actually built. And that was a cool thing for us to be able to see. And as you can tell, it's kind of a white model. We don't we try not to put too much kind of color material or actual objects in the space, because we find that some clients maybe get a little bit hung up on, well, that's not the type of microscope that I use. And we're like, oh, okay, but it's a microscope. So that's one thing that we've kind of learned in keeping the models a little bit simple. This room in particular, you can see we have that angled wall leading into the restroom, and that gives a lab technician perfect line of sight really through everywhere in the room that they need to be able to see.
Yeah, we have a lot of tools that are we have a visualization team, and we have a lot of tools that help us race to render, is what I like to call it. This is a working model that isn't intended to accurately portray finishes, but just make sure that the space is right. Again, we're testing, do we have the right pieces of equipment? Do we have in the right location? Do we have things that are creating, too cramped of spaces? Unfortunately, in sim centers, we can't really make the room bigger to accommodate more cameras, more people, because we want it to be exactly like, again, for this example, the patient rooms across the street in the hospital. So this just gets it's really easy to get a user or a client that's hung up on, is the space big enough? Right. Or can we do that? And you put them in this virtual environment, and suddenly you're not, I don't know if anyone's been in the room before, we have to look at the ceiling tiles and try to explain how big a space is. We can really just let that client feel it. And, really quickly, they can validate that, yeah, this works. I can perform what I need to do in the space like this.
Yeah.
So earlier you mentioned
go ahead.
some of those more complex spaces, and we do have one of those ready to go. If we've got a couple of minutes to kind of go check that one out. Adrian, do you want to use that special tool to get us into that new space?
That special magic tool? Yeah, most definitely. So and thank you both for speaking too. I mean, I can see how the sight lines and just getting that one-to-one scale in here is so impactful in the type of work you all do. And then to maybe even a more technical environment, like an operating room, which is where we're going to hop over to right now. So group, just like how you can go into the library in the wild and pull out assets, you also can pull out other models that you've loaded in and easily take the entire group that you're with you. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm just going to pull out this pane of glass, and I like to think of it as like butterfly catching. So I'm going to get Luke, I'm going to get Austin and you all, and I'll see you all on the flip side. All right, so new workshop, new model on the workbench. Didn't break the flow of conversation, right? Because that's so key too. If we're going to keep clients and counterparts engaged, we couldn't ask them to log out and log back in. We would just lose that momentum. But again, maybe just a quick question. Tell us about how you set up this workshop and what we got here, Tim.
Yeah, so this one was a little bit more forward-facing. Instead of clustering all those images around the model, we tried to, on this effort, embrace that dojo and make it a little bit more related to the project as a whole. So this is a surgery center that we're doing in St. Louis, Missouri. Again, we've made a lot of informed decisions. We've cited the building. We've got a flow and movement really wasn't in question because it was a pretty confined site. But what was the physician wanted to know, how big are my ORs and is that adequate in size, and how does it perform? And so we created a model like this, which allowed us to grab a physician and place them in that arena. And I think you've seen in the other model example, we're looking at this and experiencing it like a 3D printed model, but we can also jump in at a one-to-one scale. So what we would do here is we put the physician, put the VR goggles. They don't have any VR expertise. They just need to be able to put the goggles on and hold two controllers and use their hands to point. But we can place them exactly where the physician would be for a surgery. And then we have teams that can work with them in a one-to-one scale. And we also have teams that can work above and almost like a marionette puppet, start to move some of those critical parts and pieces that you see in the room. And we can stage it for all different types of procedures. I don't use this piece of equipment for this procedure, but I do for this one. And I would have the anesthesiologist, for example, at the head of the table. I would have this piece. And it's amazing to watch them. And the first thing they do is they open their arms like full stretch and they kind of spin around and they get that sense of scale. It's beautiful to see on this Zoom call. but it just doesn't give you the whole feel that when you're virtually immersed in that space, that you feel like you can reach out and touch and do I have enough space? So very effective. Again, they all look a little rough. Again, we have a lot of ways of showing visualization, and rendering it to make it look like a real photo. That's not what this is for. We get a lot of success trying to make sure that we're right, because if I get this right and I get the sign off that I'm looking for from the physician and staff and the client, then my teams can start to coordinate all those disciplines. We can get the power and the gases and the equipment all stage set and stored. It just makes our teams work more, efficiently, I'd say, in design development and CD phases.
So very interesting. And I think you might have hit on this a little bit, Tim. What do the different lines on the floor here represent?
So those lines represent any kind of a ceiling mounted equipment that are hanging on booms. So for example, that's the reach of, so the green ones in the center, those would be this surgical lights. We can move those arms and that shows you the reach that they can get within the space. So we don't necessarily need to be able to position all the infinite ways you can put those booms, but we can at least put on the floor a zone, if you will, and just describe to the physician that if any of the equipment is in that room, or if you're standing in that within that ring, we can light that surface effectively.
Yeah, and that's to kind of piggyback on that one from personal experience. That can be a huge thing, because when we're designing these booms, working with our engineers and the consultants that are providing the booms, the manufacturers, we add stops in, and as you can see, if I have that pink ring right over there, I can't have it going through the wall. That's one of those things. If you run a boom through a wall, oops, doesn't quite cut it. So we add those stops in there, and being able to just see exactly where on the floor those stops are going to need to be translated into the ceiling, because these circles obviously can be translated up to that ceiling too. We don't have that turned on right now, but it's also just as AJ pointed out and Tim pointed out, you can't get the grand scale of things until you're in this model. And right now I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4 with AJ, 5 with myself, people in here, well, 6, including our individual on the table. But that's not uncommon. We might see 9 or 10 different people in this operating room at any given time. And there might be 2 or 3 people actually performing the procedure, asking their supporting staff to be handing things around. So this is actually pretty well cleaned up. If you ever have a chance to maybe look at an image of an operating room after maybe some trauma surgery, it is not an easy sight to see. And those are the kinds of things that our doctors, our physicians are dealing with every day. So being able to give them this visualization, that they can see where the carts are going to go, when they need them, when they don't need them, if they want to add a table right here, maybe the table needs to be adjustable, it needs to be able to go over here, it's on wheels. It's truly just a great tool to be able to familiarize them with something incredibly important. And they can also use it for recruiting as well. If they're trying to get some new physicians into the space, they can show them a little bit of what they're getting into.
Sure. And this is more of
The
an
interesting thing real quick about this project,
let
me just add one thing. It started early in design, the design phase, probably in schematic design and trying to right size this room. It started with a request from the owner to go to a shell space that they had within their hospital and tape out a footprint of this space. So, I mean, you can imagine this substitutes literally, duct taped outline of the room. And, that verticality, the complexness of all the equipment, just taping out a perimeter doesn't quite win the day. And we already had all of this in our Revit model. We just had to create a section box around that OR, and we're off and running. So,
no, thanks for that. And I mean, even too, just more of a comment from my standpoint is, and feel free to chime in, either of you. I find it very interesting being able to blend these different vantage points and perspectives simultaneously, where I'm up here and you all, the audience, are up here at bird's eye view. Luke's down in there, in the trenches, if you will, 1-to-1 scale, but we can have a simultaneous conversation to confirm, are you seeing the same thing that I'm seeing? And, hopping in, hopping back out. So I know that's something that I find very interesting, thinking about this type of work, of how you can blend those perspectives and vantage points together simultaneously. Okay. Well,
It's incredibly powerful.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, it's incredibly powerful to do this because we do work in those different scales, but there's a third component to that, and that's casting this in a design meeting. Sometimes we work with clients that don't feel comfortable putting the VR headsets on.
Sure.
What you're seeing here, they can see in the meeting too. So one person is kind of virtually in that environment, and there's a handful of other people commenting in that conversation, much like we are on this Zoom call. And it's a great dialogue to have in a design meeting.
Most definitely. Most definitely. You're right. Not everyone wants to go into a headset. And as Luke joins us back up here in the dojo. And we are getting right up against our Q&A session. But final question I have, and Luke, you and I can then hop out of headset back to the Zoom call, is for people that might be joining us today, firms that are thinking about getting started in VR, but haven't, what piece of advice would you all give to them?
Yeah, I'd say take every ounce of that honeymoon phase, that wow factor that you can, because the more familiar you are with moving around and kind of, Tim and I joke a lot of times, we are always trying to break your software, AJ, and anytime we feel like we get close, we reach out and you tell us just how far we are. But we try to add as much in, we try to add videos, we try to add a whole bunch of stuff. So it's really get in and test those boundaries, because the way it works for Tim and I can guarantee it's going to work differently for whoever else comes in here, because this is a pretty obscure way to start using VR. But it's, use it and adapt it. It's the most versatile tool I've really used in a long time.
Very good.
Right. I would add to that, support your early adopters and get them on board and develop this tool internally before you put, it's not always about showing off to the client or trying to wow them. The tool works internally just as well as it does externally in front of a client. And I would develop those skill sets and figure out what's best and right for your firm and for the work you do to use it, because again, it has a lot of different ways it can be used effectively.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, high five, Luke. Thank you all for sharing your fantastic technical design with us. How about we hop out of headset back onto the Zoom call and we answer some questions for the group.
Fantastic presentation, everyone. It's so cool just being immersed in that space with you. And for myself, as the eyes of the audience, it really felt like we were standing there with you. And it seems like the audience was pretty excited about that as well. We've got a couple of questions that I'm going to guide us through here. First off the bat, it looks like we have a couple questions about headsets. There's an anonymous attendee, as well as some other people asking about bringing clients into here. So maybe AJ and Luke, could you talk us through what headsets you're joining, why you decided to use those as options, and then maybe what are some other available options for people who are interested in joining these types of experiences in VR?
Yeah. What were you using today, Luke?
Today I was using the initial Oculus Quest. And the reason why I was using that was because as you can see, there was no tethers. I was able to grab it, throw it on. I don't have sensors around the room or anything. It's a headset, 2 controllers, and I'm good to go. And at the time I got that, it was it was by far the best one available at that time. And I think Tim's also using the Oculus Quest, and
we use the link cable to we have box laptops, most of our staff, that seem to be powerful enough, more powerful than the Quest. So sometimes when we get into larger models or ones that have more rendered materials, we'll have one cable that comes out of our headset and ties into the laptop. It doesn't really get in the way. Again, it's not quite as much as putting those base stations up like we maybe did in the past, but that does seem to increase the performance tremendously. And we have a 4-story cancer center fully rendered, and we can use that with the link cable, no problems.
Yeah, I mean, echoing that, I was using my Meta Quest 2, similar to Tim, whether it be tethering it or using the AirLink. I love the flexibility of it, certainly the cost effectiveness of this headset, but there are other options out there too, whether it be the Pico Neo 3 from Pico Interactive, another untethered option, the Valve Index, HTC Vive Pro, a lot of different options of how you can experience this.
Thank you for sharing, everyone. We'll go ahead and take our next question here. This is from Giovanni Moravito. I believe that's the correct pronunciation. Giovanni said, great presentation. Do you find that the model from Revit has any trouble with certain families or level of detail on performance in the wild?
Do you want to answer that one, Luke?
Yeah, I can answer that one. I can start it off. There are certainly ways to model families that are better than others. A lot of it, correct me if I'm wrong, Tim and AJ, it comes down to the mesh and the surfaces and the amount of those that you have. So the fewer mesh surfaces that you have, the better off you're going to be. If you have a small model like that OR, you're not going to get bogged down really at all, especially if you have a link cable, in my experience. But those larger items or those larger models, like maybe that SimCenter still wouldn't be that large. Right now, that's about as big as we like to have modeled full in VR, because once you start getting 9 or 10 different people in that model with you, it does start to slow down just a bit for some individuals. As far as families go, you don't really have to model anything differently. We do find there are some kind of tips and tricks that we've learned along the way. And I know AJ and Austin, you guys have a plethora of resources at the Wild for some of those tips and tricks to be using. So I don't want to take all the time to answer that, but just one issue that I've run into is some families are connected to each other. So like if I go to paint a wall, I might be painting 10, 15 walls around the space. So there is some intentionality with that and some of the learning curve that we've had to learn, and I still am learning, but breaking out those families so that they're able to be controlled individually within the Wild.
Yeah, model management is just like any other program. You just have to know what you have to think your steps through. What can you live without in the model? If you're bringing in a larger project, you might want to, like, for example, bringing in a model that has landscaping, but you have no intentions of really studying the building on the outside or the exterior. You know, if you can set up your 3D view in Revit and make sure that that's off and so it doesn't come through and bog your model down, I think those are just some good practices.
Ditto.
Thanks for the great answer, everyone. I have another question that's kind of combining some questions from two people, one from Charlotte Pavel, as well as from Scott Gilliam, asking about what exactly is involved to bring someone else into this experience long distance. What is the process, whether they need specific type of equipment or do they need to be on a specific presentation platform? How can we bring people together into these experiences from long distances?
Well, I'll take a crack at that. The VR headset, when you have it, getting that, it's just like anything else. You have to have the program on your machine. There's a little bit of what link do I need to download what I need to have on my headset. Once you have an account with the Wild, so if we work with a client and we give them a user account and they create a Wild account, then it's just a matter of putting on the headset and we can connect. For example, Luke and I could call him up and say, hey, can we jump into this model? And as long as I've shared the model with him and it's ready to go, we can log on probably faster than we can to a Zoom call. So it's seamless getting someone going on that. But I will also say that you also provide ways that you can look at this on your tablet and also on the screen. I've actually worked with people who aren't even in the design and construction industry to show them and demonstrate this. And with their phone, they can see, just like we saw, they could be watching in the AR, they're casting it on the table, the model that we were looking at, and they can see little striped people working in the model. And it's been fantastic. And so there's really no, it's not a big learning curve at all. Just make sure you have the right software and a headset that's compatible.
Yeah.
Follow up to that question. This might be for you, AJ.
Sure.
Does this integrate with augmented reality?
Yeah, Tim hinted at it there. There's 3 ways to access the Wild: headset, desktop, and AR, and that AR being through a newer iOS device. And we as an organization have intentionally done that for a few reasons. One, we didn't want to put all of our eggs in the VR basket, but 2, we recognize that not everyone wants to go into goggles. So kind of even what Tim was hinting at there, by meeting people where they're at and where they're comfortable, we can have a higher likelihood of driving adoption and this snowball getting bigger and bigger. But the AR side too, we believe as a company that having 3 channels makes this overall stronger than any one part of its parts. By having going out the site, maybe Tim was out at the site holding up his tablet. Luke and I are in our home offices here wearing our goggles. he's walking the site, they see our avatars, and based off the feedback, the conversation, we're using the mask tool or marking things up, taking measurements, combining these together makes it a very powerful application. So a long-winded answer of saying, yes, AR is certainly a part of what the wild can bring to the table.
All right, thank you, AJ. I'm going to go ahead and field one last question here that I think kind of summarizes the context of everything we've been talking about today. This is from David Coleman. Do you see healthcare being one of the primary types of projects where VR might even become mandatory during design due to the complexity?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a space for it. Especially, I guess, from our experience, we have healthcare clients that we've been working with for 20 or 30 years. A lot of it comes down to the receiving end, the leadership on the other side. What we're finding the trend, obviously, is as people start to retire and someone young kind of takes in that role in that spot, they're looking for new ways to work and new ways to get better at design solutions. So we even saw that with the pandemic when we were working, all of a sudden we had to work remote and we had the uptick in Zoom calls and how do we interact. There's no safer way to interact than staying in your own room, but combining in a virtual environment. So our clients are very open right now to how do we keep design moving forward in the healthcare arena, but not bring all those healthy people to our campus right now for design meetings. So yeah, very opportunistic time for sure.
And I'll piggyback on that, and I have a slightly different answer. Yes, I see it vitally important in healthcare. And that's initially, I thought that was kind of the one main place for it, but I've kind of changed my tune on that a bit. Because when you're talking about healthcare, your client already knows it's high design. It's extremely important. They have to get it right. But we might have, we might be doing a set of classrooms, and that project is just as important to that client as a healthcare situation is to maybe a CEO of a hospital. So if we can take something like VR, and we can tell them, yeah, we use this on some patient rooms, but we want to use it on your classroom too, to give that level of importance, that emphasis from us and that buy-in. I think it raises their level, and it gets them more excited about just the expectations that we have of ourselves and of the design that's coming forth.
Well, we'll go ahead and take that as our last question. AJ, any closing remarks you'd like to share with us here?
First off, just a big thank you to absolutely everyone. And I guess just winding down that last question, I think, and I've heard Luke say this, so Luke gets all the royalties for this, but familiarity creates comfort. VR is a great tool to bring into the equation whenever you're just trying to really redefine and raise the bar on what collaboration and understanding. Not everyone can understand a 2D blueprint and their plan. Not everyone wants to sit through a PowerPoint. You may not have the luxury of doing mock-ups anymore. So any way that you're looking to consolidate and close that feedback loop, there's an application for a tool like this. May not be in the exact same way every time, but there are ways just to create a shared experience so that all parties can better articulate and advocate for project priorities. So that would be one of the closing thoughts I would leave with everyone joining us today. And I guess even further, closing this down, if anyone's excited about what they saw today, curious about what they saw today, let's give it a go. Get going on a trial with our platform, get in there, experience it, think how this may relate back to your workflow. And even more so, if you're salivating, we have a little bit of a promotion going on right now of getting you 50% off your first 3 months if you go with one of our annual plans. So on that note, just a big thank you once again, Tim, Luke, very much appreciate your amazing perspectives. Thank you both for being technology evangelists and enthusiasts, and for you all joining us here again today. Until next time, we'll look forward to seeing you and taking a walk in the wild. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.